Chapter 48. This Venerable One's Old Dragon. Now that Chu Wanning mentioned it, Moran couldn't help but agree. His shizun was right. A faint odor had followed the fake Gochin. Moran had thought he was imagining it, but if Chu Wanning had also noticed it, then there could be no mistake. The smell of death. So not only was this Gochin not the true god himself, he wasn't even a living person. In other words, the one behind this mess had just pulled the strings attached to a corpse dressed as the god of weaponry. The real puppeteer wasn't even here. Moran's thoughts were interrupted by a low, sorrowful chuckle from the direction of Jincheng Lake. Immediately after, a deathly pale body shot out from the water like an arrow as the fake Gochin leapt into the air. But both his appearance and behavior had become terrible to behold, his skin wrinkled all over like a snake in the midst of molting, or a silkworm writhing to break through its cocoon. "You hang of the night sky, the Baidu immortal? Chu Zongshu, you really do live up to your name." The fake Gochin levitated above the crystalline water of the lake, face twisting into a semblance of a gnarled smirk, even as pieces peeled off. "How did Rufang's sect let someone like you slip through their fingers?" Chu Wanning's voice was frosty as he asked, "Just who exactly are you?" "You don't need to know who I am," said the fake Gochin. "I won't let you know who I am either. You can just think of me as someone who should have died long ago, but who crawled out of hell solely to take the lives of you, the righteous and honorable." "Shameless," Wangua rumbled. "The heart-plug willow has been destroyed, with your strength alone. Without the help of the holy tree, you neither have a way to use the forbidden techniques, nor a means to carry out further transgressions." The fake Gochin sneered. "You old eel, on your last breath and still trying to get in my way. What makes you think you have the right to speak here? Get lost." "And do you think that you, as a white chess piece, have any right to speak?" Chu Wanning interrupted. A white chess piece, as implied by the name, was a special game piece in the Qianlong chess formation. The individual using the technique could place a portion of their soul into a newly deceased body and fuse the two to form a chess piece as white as pure jade. This white chess piece differed from the common black variety, which merely obeyed commands. In short, a white chess piece was a stand-in for the spellcaster. Though their spiritual power was weaker than that of their original form, they could think and act independently, and the things they saw and heard were conveyed to the person controlling them. The fake Gochin's identity was exposed, but his only reaction was to laugh and clap. "Very good, good, good." After these three cries, the fake Gochin's face had become even more broken and contorted. It seemed that the spell was nearing its end and was unable to support the white chess piece for much longer. Thus, the original form of the corpse was emerging. "Chu Wanning, don't get too full of yourself now. Do you really think this will stop me? Even if the heart-plug willow was destroyed, my true self can always find other sources of spiritual energy. You, on the other hand." As the false god spoke, his eyes, which grew dimmer and less focused by the second, suddenly swept past Chu Wanning to land on Moran, filled with malicious intent. Moran was struck by a sudden wave of apprehension. "If you think that I'm the only one in this world who knows the three forbidden techniques," the fake Gochin said languidly, mockingly, "then I'm afraid you won't have much longer to live." "What do you mean by that?" Chu Wanning demanded sternly, his eyebrows lowered in a frown. However, the fake Gochin ceased to speak. He froze, then exploded into foul-smelling chunks as a jade-white chess piece shot out from his body and whirled into the air, backlit by the rising sun, before it fell into Jincheng Lake with a plop. It seemed that the puppeteer in the shadows, having lost the assistance of the heart-plug willow, had exhausted his spiritual energy. Simultaneously, Wangua, who had also relied on the heart-plug willow's spiritual energy to survive, staggered and fell to the ground with a thud. Ugh! Xue Meng let out a startled cry. Wangua! Wangua! Moran also exclaimed. All four of them gathered around the old dragon. Wangua was barely hanging on, his lips colorless. He looked at them and spoke with a voice that faltered like the setting sun. Don't believe that man's nonsense. In his words, there was more falsehood than truth. Shimei's face brimmed with worry and sorrow. Jianbei, please don't speak any further, he said softly. Let me heal you. No, there's no need. If even your master couldn't do it, then you... Wangua coughed roughly several times, then said, panting, All these years, many came seeking weapons, but when that villain arrived, the heart-plug willow was loath to let him claim the holy weapons left behind by our master, and so destroyed them all. The only ones remaining were a willow vine equal to it in power, and the sword of the exalted god. At the mention of this blade, Xue Meng's expression grew darker, his mouth set in a thin and wordless line. The willow vine went to this young Daozhang. Wangua glanced at Moran. That day, by the lakeside, I said to you that even if you were evil in the past, I would not stop you, and that I could only hope that you would pursue virtue in the future. But in actuality, in accordance with my master's wishes, holy weapons should belong only to the virtuous. That's why I hope that you will. Moran understood that it was already difficult for him to speak, and so interrupted. Don't worry, Jianbei, I understand. That's good, Wangua murmured. Then I can rest easy. He gazed skyward, lips trembling slightly. It is said that when one goes to Jincheng Lake seeking a weapon, a creature from the lake will make a request. Most of those requests were to gouge the seeker's moral character, but there were the occasional exceptions. Wangua's voice grew quieter and quieter, tens of thousands of years flitting past his eyes like a carousel lantern. I had an agreement with my master. When he departed, I was to stay and guard Jincheng Lake without leaving. Who could have known that I would be standing guard for millennia upon millennia? The sights I beheld in my youth, the mountains and rivers, I never got to see them again. He turned his head slowly to gaze beseechingly at Moran, his eyes flickering with a warm wetness. In that instant, Moran suddenly knew what he was about to say. Sure enough, Wangua said softly, Young Daozhang, the plum blossoms at the waist of the mountain bloom splendidly throughout the year. I was very fond of them when I was young. Even though you have already received your holy weapon, would you still be willing to? Moran was about to say yes, I'll go get you a branch. However, before he could even start, the light in Wangua's golden eyes abruptly went out. Jiangnan has little but for a gift of spring in the form of a blossoming branch. Snow-tipped peaks towered majestically in the distance, and gleaming gold danced resplendent on the lake surface as the rising sun bathed the waters in its red-hued light. The waves and spray shattered the rays into glimmering crimson. Wangua had passed. He had been among the first dragons at the creation of the world, had once been earth-shakingly powerful, and had once bowed in servitude and carried his master to all corners of the land. Everyone had said that the brand compelled his submission, but it had been his respect for Gochen that bound him to his millennia-long promise. In this vast land, few remained who remembered the founding of the world. Wangua knew. He knew that although the real Gochen, the exalted veins, cursed with demonic blood, his mother had been taken against her will. Gochen had abhorred demons, and so stood with Fuxi against their invasion. He had used that very powerful demonic blood of his to forge the first true sword for Fuxi's hands, and had aided him in eradicating the demon race from the mortal realm. But after the unification of heaven and earth, Fuxi had harbored misgivings and resentment toward Gochen the Exalted due to that half-demon blood. Gochen was no fool. 100 years later, he excused himself from the realm of the gods of his own volition and descended into the realm of man. During his journey, he saw endless suffering and slaughter. He concluded that he shouldn't have brought the very notion of sword into existence, and he was filled with remorse. So, he gathered many of the weapons he had left in the mortal realm, sealed them in the arsenal in Jincheng Lake, planted the heart-pluck willow as a guardian, and instructed the creatures of the lake that of those who came seeking, only the virtuous were befitting. Now, Gochen was no more, and Wangua had passed. Henceforth, there will be no more holy weapons within Jincheng Lake, and no more merfolk. With the thunderous fall of the heart-pluck willow, all of these sins and acts of repentance, the distortion and dedication, had shattered like smoke and ash. For a moment, no one spoke. In the ferocious snowstorm, the scarlet words written on the stone tablet by the side of Jincheng Lake, "The path forward is difficult," were the same as when they had first seen them. Meanwhile, the surface of the lake, now serene, hid all the calamity and suffering that had transpired beneath it. It looked just like it had when they first climbed up Dawning Peak, when they were as yet unaware of the bloody story hidden behind "The path forward is difficult." Moran looked up at the sky. Above the precipice of the peak, a lone eagle soared against the snowdrift. He suddenly thought of how, in his past life, Wangua had given him a powerful long blade. In this life, the blade he'd seen was a mere fake, and the original that had once belonged to him had likely already been destroyed by the heart-pluck willow before he could so much as glimpse at it. A short while passed, and, unbidden, Moran's mind conjured up old memories. It was the year he had come to Jincheng Lake seeking a weapon. Wangua emerged from the water, studied him with golden eyes that were gentle and friendly, and said, "The plum blossoms at the waist of the mountain are blooming beautifully. Could you go retrieve a branch for me?" Moran closed his eyes and raised an arm to cover them. He didn't know what events had transpired below the lake in his past life. At the time, he had taken Wang Yu's request for pointless pretentiousness. It took many days before they returned to Xisheng Peak. Chu Wanning's shoulder was seriously injured, and the 3 youths were exhausted, so they rested at Dai City for several days before returning. Xue Meng said nothing of what happened to Xue Chengyong and Madame Wang. Proud as he was, regardless of whether his parents reacted with disappointment or sympathy, either would be salt in the wound. Chu Wanning noticed this, and his heart ached. So he buried himself in ancient tomes and scrolls all day, searching for some other way of obtaining a holy weapon for Xue Meng, or else some means of allowing a mortal to rival a holy weapon in strength. Apart from this, just who had that fake Gochen been, and where was his true self? And what was the meaning behind the last thing that white chess piece had said before it disintegrated? There were many and more things to worry about, and so the candle in the library of the Red Lotus Pavillion burned all night as the water clock dripped away. Scrolls sprawled with complicated passages littered on the floor, and buried in the depths of these files was Chu Wanning's exhausted face. "Yuheng, look at the state of your shoulder. Don't be so reckless." Chu Chengyong sat next to him and chattered fussily, holding a warm cup of tea. "The Tanlang Elder is a master of the healing arts. Make some time and go have him take a look." "No need, it's already started to heal." Chu Chengyong clicked his tongue. "That won't do. Look at yourself. You've looked terrible ever since you got back. 9 out of 10 people who've seen you say you seem like you're about to pass out. If you ask me, there's something strange about that wound. Might be some kind of poison or whatever. It's better to be careful." Chu Wanning glanced up. "I seem like I'm about to pass out." He paused and smiled coldly. "Who said that?" Chu Chengyong paused for a long moment before eventually saying, "Hiya, Yuheng, can you not always act like you're made of metal and everyone else is made of paper?" "I know my own limits." Chu Chengyong mumbled something inaudibly. From the movement of his lips, it was very possibly, "Know your limits, my ass." Luckily, Chu Wanning was too absorbed in his book to see. They chatted a while longer, until Chu Chengyong saw that it was getting late and got up to head back and keep his wifey company. Before leaving, he made sure to fuss some more. "Yuheng, don't stay up too late. Menger will die of guilt if he sees you like this." Chu Wanning ignored him with gusto. Having been met with such frosty reception, Chu Chengyong could only scratch his head awkwardly and leave. Chu Wanning drank some medicine, then returned to the table to continue his research until he started feeling a bit lightheaded. He propped his forehead in one hand, nauseous. The nausea faded in short order, so he chalked it up to being tired and paid it no heed. The night grew late, and finally, too woozy to continue, Chu Wanning fell asleep with his brows drawn tightly together and his head pillowed on a sweeping sleeve next to the small mountain of tomes. An unfinished scroll lay across his knees, while the hem of his robes drooped to the floor like a water wave. That night he dreamt. The stream, unlike most, was clear and distinct, nearly real. Chu Wanning was standing within Loyalty Hall of Xisheng Peak, but this Loyalty Hall was somewhat different from the one he knew. Many furnishings and details had been altered. Before he had a chance to take a closer look, the gates swung open, setting crimson curtains adrift. A person walked in. "Shizun!" This individual had a handsome face and deep black eyes tinted purple. He was a young man, but when he curled the corners of his lips, he looked almost childlike. "Moran?" Chu Wanning stood and was about to walk over, but he found that his wrists and ankles were shackled by 4 lengths of metal chains that flowed with spiritual power. They fettered him in place and rendered him unable to move. Shock was followed by overflowing rage. Chu Wanning glared at the chains with disbelief, anger twisting his expression and stoppering his words. It was a good while before he lifted his head to say harshly, "Mowa you, what do you think you're doing? Unbind me at once!" But this man acted like he hadn't heard a word of Chu Wanning's furious bellows. A lazy smile and a pair of dimples appeared on his face as he strode over and gripped Chu Wanning by the jaw.